Hey everyone, it's Desy Cheng, and if you are a hybrid stills and video shooter just like me, and you just picked up the Sony A7IV, then watch this entire video just because I'm going to tell you about how I set up my camera as a hybrid shooter. And now I know there's 100 things that you can customize, but I'm just going to go through some of the main features that I would change for photography and for video. Now let's start with photography. So the first thing you want to do is you want to switch the camera mode into stills mode. And for me personally, I shoot everything manual, so I'll switch it to manual, but you can choose, whatever mode you want. Next up is the image quality settings. I shoot RAW, so I'm gonna change it to RAW. And here you can also choose what you wanna shoot in each slot. So you can do RAW plus JPEG as a backup, or you can do RAW, or whatever you want. So next up, the most annoying thing that I can hear is this autofocus sound. And so I'm gonna turn these sound settings off. So next up, I'm gonna change my control wheels and dials so that my front dial right here is gonna control my shutter. My back wheel right here, where my thumb is, will control the aperture, and the control wheel at the very, very back right here will control the ISO. Next up, let's talk about autofocus. So I generally shoot in AFC mode probably about 98% of the time, just because even if I'm shooting still objects, I potentially might be moving or the subject might be moving or anything like that. So autofocus will continuously track that subject, whether they move, a millimeter or 2 millimeters away or shift it left or right or anything like that. The AFC will always track it. But if you are shooting things like landscape or still subjects or objects and you're not moving or your camera's on a tripod, then potentially the AFS mode might be better for you. By default, the touch autofocus is enabled, so all you gotta do is you gotta tap onto the screen at an object, whatever you want in focus. There will be a white box that will appear. It doesn't mean that it's in focus yet. You do have to press the shutter halfway for it to enable, and the white box will turn green, and that will mean that is focus tracking on whatever that subject or object is. So whether it's going towards you or away from you, left, right, or anything like that, it's always gonna maintain focus. Now, if you don't want that option and you wanna cancel the touch tracking, you just have to press the middle button and that will cancel out the touch tracking. Now, the next important thing about autofocus is the focus area. So by default, it is set to the C2 button at the very top of the camera. And when you press it, you have your option to kind of go through your different options. The first one is wide. And so by that one, when you press the shutter halfway, the camera just kind of auto detects whatever it thinks is going to be in focus. And it does a fairly good job. However, if you wanted to have pinpoint focus where you choose what's in focus, you could either tap to focus, or if you didn't want to tap to focus, you can do single point tracking. So what you got to do is you got to tap that custom button and then go to the very bottom where it says a tracking which is expand spot, and you kind of click that button. And so what happens is that number one, that focus dot right there, you can use it with the joystick on your camera to kind of change wherever it is. Or, what's even faster is kind of like where you focus on something and then you just kind of move the frame around. So whatever you do, let's say, for example, if you have the cursor in the middle of the screen, all you got to do is you just got to point to that and kind of focus around and move your camera around, and wherever you're framing it's always going to be in focus, just because you're going to pinpoint that subject and then you're going to always kind of get them in focus. So one thing to note though is you will always have to be kind of focus and then reframe, focus, reframe, focus, reframe. So that's just one thing that you got to note. So the next thing I want to change is in the drive mode. So by default, if you click left on the D-pad right here, you enter the drive mode. So you can either do single shooting where you just take one photo at a time. But for me, sometimes, I'm shooting my fast moving kids, so I always want to have a burst of photos. Now you can change it. I'm going to scroll down to continuous shooting mid, or you can do slow, or you can do high. So I don't necessarily need high just because that's gonna be way too many photos. So I generally choose the mid option, which gives me a great burst just to kind of capture my kids running around or whatever it is that you need. And the next thing I want to do is I want to change that middle button right here to become the Aps-C crop mode button. So at a push of a button, I can crop in. So if I'm shooting, for example, at 35 millimeter, if I press that button right there, it's going to crop into about 50 millimeters. And yeah, it's a great feature to have, and you can do it in photo or video. And the final setting I'm gonna change in this camera in photo mode is I'm gonna head on over to the operation customization, and for the different set for stills and movie, I'm actually going to select the picture profile. And the reason is just because when I switch to video mode, I'm always gonna be shooting in S-Log3. And when I'm shooting in stills mode, I just kind of want to be shooting in standard or no picture profile. So that's the next step I'm going to do. And so now when I switch to video mode, I'm in my S-Log3, and when I switch to photo mode, I'm in essentially no picture profile and shooting in standard. And so now let's jump into my video settings. So the first thing you want to do is switch your camera to video mode. And the big thing is, it was weird because on myself as well as a couple other friends, they had overheating issues with the camera. And one person even overheated the camera without even recording anything. He was just playing around with the customization of his settings and menus, and it just overheated. So what you gotta do is you gotta head on over to the power setting option and go to the auto power off temperature, and you have to set it to high. After doing some tests, we were unable to get the camera to overheat, but if you have it in the standard mode, it may potentially overheat after 15 minutes. So now let's move on to the recording quality settings for video. So for me, I shoot 100% in the XAVC HS4K mode, and I will mostly shoot in 24p. However, if I wanted to shoot anything slow mo, then I'll shoot something in 60p, but I'll, keep it at 24p right now. The other thing that you want to take note of is, you have the option of shooting 50 megabits per second or 100 megabits per second. For me, generally, I feel like 50 megabits per second is good enough at 420. 10-bit, always 10-bit. However, if I am shooting something professionally, then I will bump it up to 100 megabits per second, 422, but that's if I'm shooting something for a paid job. Next up, head on over to the shooting menu number 11, which is the shooting display, and you want to go down to the emphasize record display. So if you are having it off right now by default, you just see that small little record button or light, and that's all you see. However, when you change the thing to on, it has a big, nice red box that kind of goes around the screen. So it's just really evident whether you're recording or not. Next up, let's move on to shooting menu number 9, which is the image stabilization. So for me, generally, I'm mostly just handhelding my shots, especially for personal, family things. So I'm gonna go under the steady shot. I'm gonna change it to active. It's gonna crop in just a little bit, but it's gonna give me a lot more stabilization when I'm just handhelding my stuff. Next up, if you go to the exposure color setting, number 5, which is the color tone, there you can change your picture profile. I use PP8, which is S-Log3, and I have that for all of my cameras, and so far I love that one the best, and I'm just used to it. But again, you can kind of choose whatever you want, but I choose PP8. Next up, go to your setup tab and option number 8, which is the display option, and turn on the gamma display assist. And that will just kind of throw a LUT over top of your log footage so you can kind of, see it in color. So generally, when you're doing custom buttons, whatever you have for stills mode, the video will follow that. So I'm going to change some of my video settings on this camera. So on the left right here, I'm going to change it over to my white balance just because I just want to have it nice and close. And then the down button, I'm going to change it to the audio record level so I can just quickly change my audio record levels. And just like still at the middle button, I want it to be the Aps-C crop mode. And yeah, those are basically all the settings that I change on this camera to make this friendly for a hybrid and video shooter. Now again, there's hundreds of other things that you can customize and change on this camera to fit your needs, but those are just the main things that I do. If you like this video and you want to see me do more, please like and subscribe, and definitely don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Desy31.